Hello there, I'm Shane Young, and I get the privilege of helping you learn Copilot Studio. But before we start, I did want to let you know that I worked with the Microsoft product team to create this awesome training for all of you Power Platform rock stars. Cool? Cool. Okay, let's get to it. If you've built a Power Apps app, you have used PowerFX. It's that fun little language that we use to write our Excel-like formulas in our apps. Well, that language has grown up a bit since I first started using it back in 2018. So while it's still a mainstay for Power Apps, it's spread its little wings. It's now also used in Dataverse, Power Pages, and our new friend here, Copilot Studio. Not to mention, the language is open source today, so you'll continue to see it show up in new tools and hopefully one day even in Power Automate. In our earlier overview video and the conversational custom agent video, you saw some examples of where and how you can use PowerFX. For this video, I want to focus just on the PowerFX. So let's look at things like string manipulation, if formulas, data conversions, data retrieval, and even talk about some of the things you can't do, like use the set function with a variable. Or can you? All right, are you excited? I am. So let's just jump over to my desktop and take a look at how we can put your existing Power App skills to work. Okay, so here we are in Copilot Studio, and I've just built myself a quick little agent called Quick Demos. So just like we've always talked about with your Power Apps or Power Automates, I always built just really tiny apps to learn new things. I'm doing the same exact thing in Copilot Studio. So here we just want to play with some PowerFX. So I made an agent that is as simple as possible. So that way we don't have extra moving parts to navigate as we try to figure out how things work here. All right, so as we explore how PowerFX comes into play, like we know if we hit edit here, we know the instructions. You could add PowerFX there. We know that we can add them in our actions, our topics. There's a lot of different places that PowerFX surfaces that we might want to take advantage of. I think the easiest place to start though, and where it's come up the most for me while building real agents, is over in topics. So let's switch to topics, and we're just going to add a topic from blank. We're going to set the name to something really fancy like test topic. And then for the trigger, we're going to say something like run this topic every time the user says test topic. So we're trying to just really nail in. We don't want other things taking place. We don't want the instructions. We just want to learn our PowerFX now. So I'm trying to really focus myself. Okay, so we'll click out of there and then we'll go here. And to start, we're just going to do a simple send a message. Once again, Power Apps, I'd be using a label. In Power Automate, I'd be using a compose. And so here we just use a message. It gives us that blank space that we can just be like, hey, show me the outcome. Now to get started, if you look over here on the right, you see the little FX, insert PowerFX expression. So if we click that, we're going to get a little formula bar over here. And it's got some examples. And so we can definitely take advantage of those. But we can just go over here and start to write if we know what we're doing. And so I always like to start with just super simple text things, right? So maybe we're just going to make a string. So we're going to just do something like double quotes, hello space, okay? And then if we want to combine two strings, right? So we just want to say hello, ampersand, and then double space here, buddy, that would just create the string that said hello space buddy. And there's like 5 other ways to do that, but some of you are newer to PowerFX, others of you have been doing this a long time. And I just want you to see that just our normal things work. If you have a string, it goes in double quotes. You want to combine 2 strings, it's an ampersand between them. Now it doesn't have to be 2 strings straight up like that. We could do something like hello, ampersand, and say we want to pull in the logged in user's name. Oh, how do we do that? So in Power Apps, we'd probably try to do something like the user function, but that doesn't work because while this is PowerFX, there are some little nuances that are different. And so, all right, what do I do here? What I'm going to do is I'm going to use one of the system variables. So we're going to start to type in system like that. We hit tab, we're going to do a dot, and it's like, all right, for system, here are all the things I know. Well, there's a user. We'll hit enter, and then we'll do another dot, and then display name. So then this will say, hello, Shane Young. And if we say insert, that puts the formula over here. And so let's just test it. Let's go up here and hit save. All right, that's done saving. Everything in Shane, we already know all this, like you're boring here. Just remember, we got to kind of catch everyone up, but I promise by the time we get to the end, we're going to show some really cool stuff. We're just going to kind of start foundationally, right? But so down here, we're going to say test topic, and we're going to hit enter. And so look, that invoked our topic over here in the activity map, and it says, hello, Shane Young. There you go. Shocking. It works. I know, but this is like how we get there. So let's go ahead and hit edit. To be honest, here, what I could have done instead is we could just get rid of all that. And I could have just said hello space. And then if I'm like, all right, how do I find that variable? So right here we have variables. So we could say insert a variable And if we looked under system and just did a search for user, oh, there's user.displayname. And there's that syntax I use, system.user.displayname. You don't have to memorize all this stuff. You can always just check this variable list and then use that syntax in your formulas. Or in this case, like for this example, we could just do literally that. And that is going to spit out the same exact thing. All right, so then let's make it a little bit more interesting, right? That's not exciting. So let's get rid of all that. So what if we wanted to go back here to our PowerFX? So other things that you might want, what if you wanted to know the current date and time, right? We could use the now function. And if we insert that, then that is going to spit out the date and time, right? Let's save real quick and do our test topic down here. All right, so look, it's March 19th at 9:23 a.m. That's right, I got up and started thinking about you guys first thing this morning. You're like 9:23 is first thing? Yeah, you know, I'm a sleeper. Anyway, there you've got that. Now, if you're like, all right, well, but my users don't want to see that. I want to see something better. Okay, no problem. We'll go back to our little edit pencil here. And so now that we understand that's how we get it, we can just click in there. So maybe we want to put our text function around it. Our text function turns a value, so whether a number or date and time, into actual text. So we can do texty things with it. So for example, I might say, take that. And then all I really wanted to see was the date time format of short time. So I just wanted to see the time. Close that. And so now if we test this, we would get the current time, which is 9:24 a.m. Now, if you're thinking, Shane, how do you know all of these things? How did you know that the text function did that? And then what date time format short time did? Let me show you the most powerful piece of documentation that's out there, right? Like if you're ever like, hey, what do I do? Let's go over here, open another tab. And here we're going to search the web and we're going to search for PowerFX formula reference. Hit enter. So you're looking for the PowerFX formula reference for the Power Platform on Microsoft Learn. Now you're going to land at the overview page most likely, but what you're looking for really here is the Canvas apps one. I feel like this is the easiest one to use. So if we click on Canvas apps, here you're going to see that all of the functions are listed, every one of them. So if you're ever like, hey, what are the different PowerFX functions? How do they work? This is the documentation. And so if we scroll down here to text, converts any value and formats a number or date and time value to a string of text. If we click on that, it is going to go in here. It's got the description. It explains the predefined formats like we just used, number placeholders if you want to make your own formats. Maybe you want to take numbers and make them look like currency. This function can do that. Maybe you are in a region where you don't like to see the whole month, day, year. You want to see day, month, year. Then you could write your own manual formula for that. There's some literal placeholders. And then finally, if we get down here at the bottom, there are some examples for you as well. Okay. So we're not going to get deep dive into this, but I wanted you guys to think about that. If you're like, hey, how do I understand more about these PowerFX expressions? How do I figure out if it has one that does the thing I want? What's the syntax? This documentation is your best bet. All right, let's switch back over to Copilot Studio. Okay, so then back over here. So if we click back into our now, because I didn't save our formula, boo me. That's all right. So what I really want to do here though, is I want to instead use this to drive some type of message like good morning versus good afternoon. So what if we did something like a condition, an if formula? So what if I said, all right, what if we take the now and use the hour function on that to get just the hour back from it? So if now hour is greater than or equal to 12, then say good afternoon. If not, say good morning. Well, let's see if this works. So let's insert this and let's go ahead and do a save and do our little test topic and look at that. It says good morning. So we have a lot of power here. All of the things that you know how to do in PowerFX, they work the same. So we can do conditions. We could have multiple. Maybe you want to have it say good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Then you would just expand this formula out to say, hey, you know, basically if it's greater than 12, it's good afternoon. But in reality, we're going to say copy. We'll go here and we'd want to kind of start at the top. We'll say, hey, if it's greater than 17, right? That's the 17 or 5 p.m. Then what we want to do is we want to say good evening, right? So something like this. So if it's greater than 17, it'd be good evening. If it's greater than 12, it'd be good afternoon. And finally, if it was greater than good morning, or it would be good morning would be the default answer. So all of your same if skills come into play here to drive this. And it doesn't have to be simple things like this, but it's, you know, this is a great place to start. Just a little message. All right, so let's get a little more complicated here. So yeah, we'll leave this right. It's a pretty fun little formula. So what I want to do now is kind of talk about, all right, well, what if we want to pull in some data and work with data as well? You can do that. So we'll go right here. We'll say add a node. And to get our data, we're going to add an action. So we've learned about actions already. We're not going to go into too details. We'll kind of do this quickly, but we can just say right here, add an action. And then we're going to add a plugin action. We get our little pop-up. We're going to go over here and we're just going to search for SharePoint. And so in SharePoint, we're going to just do a simple get items. And remember, nothing about this is tied to SharePoint. I'm just using a SharePoint list that many of you have probably seen before, my employees list, because it's just some quick, easy data for us to play with that isn't very complicated to understand when we look at it. All right, after a second, it connects. So we're going to say next. And so for the name up here, we're going to say get the list of employees. In the description, we'll just do something very similar. Get the list of employees from the SharePoint list. Seems good to me. We're going to use user authentication. So we're going to add our action. And once again, just a reminder, in the previous demos, we added lots of actions, did lots of the details. So we're trying to kind of go quickly with those here. Right? We don't need to repeat that. Go watch those if you didn't watch those videos yet. So then now that we've added the action, we need to add it actually to our topic. So we're going to hit the plus again, add an action, and under actions now, there's our get list of employees. Right? Notice to trigger the lights. I was messing with a flow that turns my lights on and off, and it works. Pretty cool. Anyway, so we'll say get list of employees. So this will get the list of employees here, and whatever data comes back, it will return. Now, all of a sudden, we got all these unresolved, whatever. It's like, what did I do? Well, I went too fast is what basically happened. So what I want to do is need to go back to my actions, because even though we gave the action its name and its authentication, we didn't tell it what list to get. So say leave. We'll click up here on SharePoint get items. And so we need to do the inputs, right? So what list do you want? So here we would choose my Power Apps videos. And then for the list name, we're also going to want to set that as a value. So we're going to say set as value because we want to always get from the same list. And then we're going to say employees. Sometimes the drop-down picker works, sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't matter. It's employees. So we'll say save. So now back to our topic, custom test topic, hit the plus again, add an action, and so get the list of employees. Going too fast is a common mistake that I make, you guys make, so that's why I left that in there for you guys to kind of see like, hey, this doesn't look right. It's because you went too fast. So say, hey, I'm going to get the items. It's going to give me a table of data, and I'm going to store that in a variable called value. Well, we're going to click on that because we don't want to name the variable value. Cool, super confusing. And I'm going to call it var employee table. Call it whatever you want, doesn't matter. Like I said, we've covered this in greater detail over in the other videos, so we're not going to get into it right now, but that all looks good to me. So now we've got a variable called var employee table. If we go down here and we were to click on the variables, we would see under select variable, now under custom, there's our var employee table. And it's like, hey, you get to this by topic var employee table. That's going to be helpful because what I want to do is, we'll get rid of this. We're going to say, I want to know how many employees there are. So we could just use our count rows. Count rows. And so then here it's going to be topic.var employee table. That's a table, right? What does count rows want? It wants a table. It doesn't care how you get there, but that should do exactly what we need. So we're going to say insert, and we probably should test this, right? So we'll say save, and then do our little test topic down here and hit enter. Now it's the first time I'm logging in, so I need to connect. It's got to authenticate. We'll say manage connections and submit. All right, that looks good. So we'll switch back to our other tab. All right, so now we can say retry and 17. And so if we went and looked at the SharePoint list, we're not going to, but there are 17 employees. So you ever get data back from one of your actions, you want to know how many rows you get. And sometimes you need to know as part of your actual process, sometimes when you're troubleshooting, it's just nice to be able to look at this. This is very common in my flows is after I get items, I throw this in here just so I can validate that, yes, it really got the data back. So it's going to be the same when I build topics or actions inside of Copilot Studio, where I just want the ability to be like, all right, did this work? It did because I'm seeing the right number there. Now, what if I wanted to save that number into a variable? So we would probably say, all right, let's go here to PowerFX. And I would be like, all right, well, I'll just go up here and use in PowerFX, right? I'd use set. Set is not a function, right? It is not one of the PowerFXs that is available inside of Copilot Studio. So then how would I grab that information? If you're going to do it, you have to do it just slightly different, right? It's going to feel very much like you do in Flow though. So we could have just went here. Now that we know that works, I'd add a node and variable management, set a variable. And inside this set of variables, so what variable do we want to set? Yeah, we'll create a new one. We'll click on it. We'll change its name to var employee count. And so now we've got that variable. And then for the value, hit the little piece here. And what's that over on the far right? Oh yeah, it's our PowerFX formulas. And so then here, we would just do our count rows again, right? So same exact thing. But so now, after this step runs, we're going to have a variable called var employee count, and it would have, in this case, the number 17 stored to it. So this is one of those things, like if you're working in Copilot Studio on your agent and you're like, hey, I really want a variable set because I want to use it other ways. Like it just would make more sense to me if this was a variable. Fire up a topic, have it go do your work, and then set a variable that way. And now it's available. And you, at that point, want to change this variable from a topic variable to a global variable. So then that way it was available throughout your app. So even though PowerFX doesn't let you set variables, like you can't see my air quotes, but I put air quotes around it, you can use PowerFX to set a variable. You just have a slightly different step to it. Let's just close that little bar. So you can also, right, we can move this stuff kind of side to side, so to speak. So like if we go back over to our get items action, I think I need to save this. All right, click on our actions, go back to SharePoint get items, and then we go here to inputs. So right now this gets all of the employees back. We know that we can do add and then a filter query if we wanted to get back a specific value, right? So for example, in my data set, I have a column called department and we set it equal to executives, and there should be 4 of those that come back. So I could write text here to let the filter query figure out on its own, like that's what I'm looking for. Or what I can do is I can go down here and say set as value, confirm. And then when I click into the value, once again, look over here to the far right, like it's sometimes a little hidden, but if you click there, there's your variables, but there's your formula again. And so maybe we're going to do something like department EQ, right? So in an OData query, it's department equals, and remember the double quotes in this case are for the string because we're going to say on the fly, ampersand. And then if I had a variable here or something, I could have that inserted. But in reality, I don't have that yet. So I'm just going to say department equals executives. And then I realize up here, I'm forgetting my single quote. So I'll put a single quote there and then ampersand, another single quote. I mean, this is very similar to the formula that we did over in the conversational agent step by step, but I just want to kind of tie this up for you, right? So that would put that in there. Now you're thinking, all right, so that's just going to write department equals executives. Like what was the point of that? You could have just typed it in. You're correct. If this works, and so what we're going to do is we're going to hit save. And this is my concept of fail fast. We want to make sure that that works. So we're going to go back over here to our topic. Actually, no, what we're going to do is go over here and we're just going to type in test topic. And so this should come back with a 4 this time instead of a 17 if everything's working correctly. Oh, 0. So that is not what I wanted. So this tells me that something's wrong with my OData filter. So let's go back to actions, SharePoint get items, and back over to inputs. If we look at this again, if we click over here on the right, it's department equals executive. I did this last time I demoed too. Department equals executive, right? So, this is really important. I'm going to leave this mess up in here too, because it would be real easy to be like, all right, the thing's broken. It doesn't know what it's doing. In reality, it was my typo. And I did this all with just hard-coded text because I want to make sure that I got it working in the simple form before we throw the curveball in there. So let's try insert this back. Let's say save again, and then let's type in test topic. There's our 4. Oh, okay. So that we know that it works hard-coded. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over here, edit. We'll go up above here. We will say we're going to set another variable. So variable management, set variable value. And then we're going to create a new variable. We're going to change its name to be var department. We're going to make it global. And then remember, we always give descriptions. So we'll just say the name of our department for using in our action, something simple like that. And so then for the value here, for right now, what we're going to do is we're just going to try once again, the simple executive. We will save this. And then 2 things I want to point out. So 1, we're going to edit again. So notice, right, I have to make sure that I set this variable before the action if I want it to be available for the action and make sure it was global. Okay, so that's good. Now we want to go tell the action to use global var department. So we're going to say actions, SharePoint get items, inputs. And so then now here in our PowerFX formula over here on the right, we'll click. So we know that whatever's between these 2 ampersands here, that's going to be what gets passed. And so that now, instead of being the hard-coded executive, that is where we put in our global, right? So the global variable dot var department. And so then now that goes in there. But that's why I wrote this thing in baby steps in little pieces there, because I wanted to kind of assemble it as I went. And now we should feel good. This should work. So we're going to say insert. We'll say save. And then we will go down here and once again do our test topic and hit enter. And we still get 4. So back to our department. We're going to stop that part of the demo now. But so at this point, if you understand everything that's happened, now you should be thinking, okay, I could go back up here and I could have some type of thing. I could ask the user, like, what department are you looking for the employees for? And then take the output from their response and put that into my variable and then continue this type of workflow. But that's the big thing I want you to understand is that PowerFX is letting you connect to a lot of these dots. So when you're struggling with just describing what you want to happen in words, sometimes coming over here, building a step-by-step topic that's using your existing, flow logic brain and your PowerFX skills to combine the pieces to drive with variables, things like that. That is a great way to get it working very consistently today that meshes with your existing skill set. So go here, right? Make these type of things happen. The other thing I'll point out, like if you've been doing a lot of these, you might be thinking, well, Shane, you could have went over here to your input and I could have described in Word, right? I could have just left this to that default of dynamically fill and described with words, and then it would have been able to kind of do this, write its own OData filter. Absolutely. But one of the things that we try to do, this is the very same as like when I build my Power Apps. I'm always trying to lower the cognitive load on my users. What? I know, fancy words. Basically, when I build UI and UX in my Power Apps, I'm trying to make it, why show them 2 buttons if there's really only 1 button they can click, right? I'm always trying to make them think less, so then that way the app is easier to use and the chances of them making a mistake are lower. The same is true with agents. With agents, like if I can make this filter query here a formula, then it doesn't have to think. It just computes the formula and puts the answer in here. I'm not making the agent have to think about one more thing. Okay, where do I get this information from? What strings do I put this together? And so I'm reducing the amount of thinking the agent has to do because I know a way to do it in a structured output. And so we're always going to get a better result by reducing the load. Leave the agent's thinking time to do things that only the agent can do. If I can do this with a formula, then let's just do this with a formula. That's really the key message here as you start to think about these things. Okay, so that's kind of your core. This is what I can do with PowerFX. Now, I do want to remind you, if you watch the previous video, like let's go look at that agent again and just talk about some of the things that it does and show you once again like the PowerFX. So we'll go back over my agents, and that was the demo IT support assistant. And so here, if we go and look at my topics and then go to custom. So for example, under the get admin access. So here's that whole question driving a variable, right? That variable is then being saved into a more specific variable to make my get items action work, right? So almost exactly what we just did over there. But what I really want to show you here that is new is, so let's go get this adaptive card. So in that demo, I built this adaptive card to kind of give a nice, pretty interface to the list of software that or hardware they might be considering. So let's click on that. So when you work at adaptive cards, there's a little drop down here. The default is JSON. So just give me a bunch of hard-coded JSON, but you can also do formula where we're going to use a combination of just JSON text with our PowerFX skills. What? I know. Now it's a little bit different because we're not going to have to concatenate things. Like you don't see my ampersands and lots of extra double quotes in here. But so for example, in here, that's like, all right, I need a URL. And so a URL needs to be either, a URL to this asset or this one. So everything right here, that is just PowerFX. If that global variable var category equals software, then use that URL. If not, use that one. But I want you to take note though, I didn't ampersand this in. I just literally put the PowerFX in there. As long as that PowerFX outputs text, we're going to get what we want. If we scroll down a little bit, down here, we made a list of all the software or hardware. And so that came back from one of my actions, right? So we highlight that in blue. So that came back from one of my actions, the action for listing those devices, use that variable. It came back from that action I just showed you with that based on that variable and its OData query. So topic var list of software or hardware, that's a table. When you have a table of data, you can't just turn table into text, right? So we use the concat function to turn a table into text. And so I said, all right, so for every row in that table, output this dash, space, ampersand, right? So we're making one string inside the formula. We're still inside the concat formula. And then title, and then space, comma, and then char 10, which makes a new line. So that is a pretty complex PowerFX formula, but it's not outside your skill set, right? And it's important to understand. I had a table. I needed the table to be text. Concat did it. And so then that was how I was able to do it. Once I was able to get it into a table, then I started manipulating, adding the dashes and the char 10 and those type of things to make it look the way I want. Another example of where PowerFX comes in, it's really unexpected, quite frankly, like that I'd be able to make this JSON on the fly like this. Like, this is a pretty neat little thing they added. Kudos to whoever came up with this idea. And the most advanced example I did over here, let's go over here to the other topic. So topics, and then let's go to new computer request. And because the reason I think this one's so advanced is because this wasn't just using my skills, but this was using my backstory, my knowledge. So here what I want to do was when I said, all right, I want to show you which devices are you interested in. And when you choose this, one of the options is options from a list variable. So you choose options from a list variable, right? It's over here, and it wanted a table. Now, what's tough about that though, is it doesn't really just want a table. It wants a very specific table. It doesn't tell you that. But so when I first tried it, I gave it just the exact table that came back from our get items devices up here. But, it didn't work, right? It was angry. It yelled at me. So this is where I ended up going in and writing some PowerFX. Because like, anytime that something says it wants a table and it's not happy with an actual table, it usually means it wants a single column table where the column name is value, and then you just have some text in there. Like, I've just learned this from years of fighting with Power Apps, right? So this is where my backstory kind of came into play. And so then once I thought that's what it wanted, I'm like, all right, well, I know how to use my data manipulation functions. So I took that list of devices. I said, hey, only pull out the one column I want to see, the title. And I said, all right, rename the title column from title to value. Because in my head, that's what it wants. It wants a column with value with all the titles. I inserted that. Bingo, bango. That was exactly what it wanted. It started working the way I wanted. Just keep that in mind. Like, don't be afraid to play. Don't be afraid to apply that other outside knowledge you have. You want one more bonus tip? You probably do, right? So let's go back over to my demo bot again. All right, so back here on quick demos. So telling you guys about using concat reminded me of another one that I've been doing. So topics, back to our little test topic here. So you have a table of data. We just looked at how you can use concat. You could use split to change things around. You can also do things like lookup. So we know that, for example, this has the 4 executives. What if I wanted to find the name of the first executive, right? We could add a node here. We could send a message, click in, FX. And so then here we could do lookup. Look at that, our lookup functions here. What do you want to look up from? So we're not putting our data source here though, but it does want a table. So we're going to do something like topic.var employee table, right? That's a table. Lookup just wants a table. It doesn't care how you get there. And to do comma, and then we're going to say lookup where title equals CEO. So that would return that whole record, but we can't show a record of information in a message. So we do a dot, and then here, how about we'll just do first name. And so then that'll return the first name of the CEO. How many times have you written that lookup formula in Power Apps today, right? Same exact thing. We just had to think a little bit differently because our table wasn't our SharePoint list named directly. It was the data that come back from the actions that was stored in a variable, and we'll take advantage of it, right? Let's just make sure it works. We'll say insert, we'll say save, and we'll jump down here and once again, type in test topic. Aren't you glad we made those really short characters, right? That's why I made the name so short. Look at that. Nicola is the CEO. And we still have 4 executives? What? This thing works. So if you know how to do it in PowerFX, you know how to do it over here in Copilot Studio. And this unlocks a lot of really great doors for us. Did you have fun? I did. I love me some PowerFX. Hopefully through this video, you got a good idea how to use your Power App skills to make your agents better. And to be super honest, when I first learned you could use PowerFX when building an agent, I was like, why? But now that I've built a lot of real-world agents, it turns out I use PowerFX all the time. 2 reasons. 1, it gives me a chance to show off my skills. And 2, more importantly, it lets me be very prescriptive with my agent, which leads to better results. All right, that's enough of this video. Hopefully I'll see you in just a second in the next one where we continue the fun. Thanks, and have a great day.